Well, hello everyone. I'm sorry I'm not going to actually be with you in your meeting in mid-October because I'm going to be overseas, but Colin and Mel and the team asked me if I might just have a quick chat with you by video around some of the issues that I know are going to be top of mind when you meet. So I've divided my talk today into three pieces. The first is to do a summary of what came out of the La Trobe seminar earlier this year. I think it was in February from memory, around building the EfS network in Australia. Then the second thing I thought you'd be interested in, I've got this National Senior Teaching Fellowship, which is looking at whether we're actually focusing on the capabilities that graduates really need for the next decades of the 21st century or not. And I thought you'd find that kind of interesting because hidden in that is in fact this issue of producing graduates who are sustainability literate in every single profession and discipline. And then the third one, which we'll probably stop there actually, I think. And then the third chunk, I thought you'd be interested in the research we've done and brought together around the whole issue of what actually constitutes effective networking for change in higher education. Building on work we did with UNESCO, but also building on some experience of the other networks that are underway across Australia, including the one that Sarah Booth's developing around assessment outcomes in Australia. So three pieces. First, La Trobe outcomes. Secondly, the big picture. Thirdly, good practice on effective networking, which you can then nick the pieces that make sense to you and actually use that as you go forward to build the EfS network. So let's just start, eh? So the first issue, what came out of the La Trobe thing. So I'm just going to read my notes because I went through the outcomes earlier today and actually wrote down some of the things that Colin had passed on that you guys had, with Colin's help, had put up on the whiteboard at the very end. So let me just quickly rehearse a few of them. The first one is, and this relates to networking, you can't network if you don't have a framework to understand what you're networking around. So that framework, we said, has two dimensions. The first is those four pillars of sustainability: social, cultural, economic and environmental. So which of these are we looking at when we're actually networking at the moment on something? And the second is, to what extent are we focusing here on the design of courses in education for sustainable development, or the support for those courses, or the delivery of those courses by staff, or the impact of those courses, the outcomes, the impact on the students. So two components to that framework, the four pillars, and then those dimensions of course design, course support, course delivery, and course impact. So I commend us to think as we go forward when you're networking around which components of those you're actually networking about when you're trying to build your websites, when you're talking to one another, and when you're sharing good practice. So that's the first outcome. The second thing we talked about is it's all very well for us to be enthusiastic, but we've got to build a business case for EfS. And that business case has to deal with the agendas that the universities and the governments and the community groups actually have now. And there's a number of elements to those. First of all, universities are interested in demand. So if you can produce a course as a result of benchmarking that has actually seen improved demand, then there's a business case for doing the benchmarking and doing the EfS course. Secondly, if you're able to develop a course that retains students, then there's a business case because retention is money. If students leave and go to another university, they take with them their funding, and as we know from the current proposals of the present government, they're going to be paying even more. So you lose people, you lose money. So are you able to utilise networking to improve, in fact, the quality of retention in the EfS programs and demonstrate that within the university? The third issue we raised around that whole idea of the business case is it's no good preaching to one another. We've got to engage the senior leaders in universities, and what we talked about and what I raised from our turnaround leadership research that we've already done is you've got to build the business case to engage the leaders in the same way that it's no good to tell business out there beyond the universities that they've got to get involved in sustainability unless there is a business case for them. At the end of the year, we're meeting at the United Nations as bringing together 100 countries to do a stocktake on what we've achieved from the decade of education for sustainable development in higher education. And with Daniela Tilbury, I'm convening that meeting. One of the outcomes of that meeting is going to be around putting firmly on the policy agenda the outcomes that we want to achieve by way of sustainability literacy in all of our educational programs. So there's a range of other policy cases you can mount in order to build the business case. So, La Trobe outcomes, the first thing was the framework, the second is the building case. The third was basically summarising the lessons from our research on turnaround leadership for sustainability in higher education. Good ideas with no ideas on how to implement them are wasted ideas. Lots of talk about good ideas, but what's happening to make them happen in practice, and to what extent, when I go through the research later about effective networking, is effective networking a tool for effective implementation? To what extent? So we've got to challenge ourselves to actually ask that question as you build the network. So good ideas with no ideas is the first message. The second is change does not spontaneously erupt. It doesn't just happen. It must be led, and it has to be led deftly. And it's not just central leaders that do it. You need the central leaders in the tent, but you need local leaders working in a nested system in order to, in fact, work together to enact change. Change is a learning process for everyone and an unlearning process. It's not an event. What is learning? Learning is learning gaps in your expertise. Implementation only occurs if you actually help people learn the gaps in their expertise in a way that enacts whatever the EfS program you've put into place is. And networking around that issue is a very important topic. The key theme, I think, in that turnaround leadership research is how do you engage the disengaged? Now, I've just talked about learning. Well, we know there's students in classes who are enthusiastic and there's ones who are less enthusiastic. The issue is engaging students is the same set of motivators as engaging staff. They want relevance, they want feasibility, they want to have an idea that they can do this, and they love the idea of successful travellers who've already come up with a cunning solution in their world that they could see they could implement in a way that would lead to happier classroom interactions, to more satisfaction in teaching, and to positive feedback from students. No one loves to leave their class with a whole lot of students discontented. So, summarising that third component that came out about the how of making change work, I commended to you the 4 L's. Effective leaders of change, like effective teachers incidentally, always listen, link, leverage, and then lead, always in that order. They listen to the people they're working with in terms of their needs, not in terms of what they're trying to sell. They link together what people find most relevant and what's happening out there that would work for others. They then leverage it in some way that people can access the good practice, and leading is helping people learn the gaps. Listen, link, leverage, and then lead, always in that order. So I leave that outcome with you. So that essentially, I think, was the key outcomes in the February workshop. We finished up, however, talking about the website, and I've just been talking to Mel today about it, and we've got a website in this country, around this area. How can we actually figure out together a way in which to engage the disengaged with that website? So this is something that's so important, because once you get onto the website, there are exemplars there from fellow travellers who have actually done something around course design, course support, course delivery, assessment of EfS that has worked. The trouble is people, as I said to you, people do not spontaneously, who are disengaged, spontaneously go onto the web on a Friday night and say, I think I'll look around and see if I can find an EfS website. So putting that February workshop outcomes together, you can see we have to be good at the what and we have to be good at the how. We have to understand it's a learning process for everyone, it's not an event. It's no good launching a website, because our real challenge for our students, the moral purpose for our students, is how on earth do we actually engage the disengaged. So that was the first thing I wanted to share with you, which was to summarise the outcomes. And I think it's important to do that, because it's no good having a second meeting if we don't keep in mind what we learned in the first meeting. And often that's what does happen, as we know, if we've ever participated in meetings in universities. Now, the second dimension. So remember, I'm doing 3 dimensions, and the second one is to update you on what's happening internationally, and in a sense encourage you to see that what you are doing is very important work. This is not peripheral to the futures of universities over the next 2 decades. It's in fact, in a sense, central. the work that you're doing. So let me now tell you a little bit about what I'm doing, and for the senior teaching fellowship for this Office for Learning and Teaching, because what I'm interested in is, are we focusing on the capabilities that really count for graduates over the next 20 years, or are we all just out of goodwill but bad habits actually focusing on outcomes we never really questioned, but we've got so good at assessing them? It's a little bit like becoming very good at assessing rubbish. It's very reliable, it's very good, but no one has learnt anything that's actually substantially helpful to the future of the country, to the future of the harmony of this country, to the inventiveness of the country, to the new sources of income. So I wanted to loop you into that because you'll see where you guys fit. And I want to commend also for you to link up with Sarah Booth, who's working with setting up a network around what is valid assessment in Australia. And so I think the two sort of, it struck me, seem to fit together kind of neatly. So let me just take you through what we're doing. I've just launched a white paper in the United States with the NPDL, which is going across all the universities and the schools in the States, with a mate of mine who's actually the brains of the outfit, a man called Michael Fullen in Canada. And that paper is entitled Education Plus. What we've argued in that paper is that schools and vocational training colleges and universities may be losing their way if they simply look, for example, at school level, at the results on NAPLAN tests. That's basics. That is not what you need as a school graduate to successfully negotiate the challenges of the coming decades. You do need that, but you need the plus. So Education Plus in schools is about basics plus. What we've argued in both vocational education and also in higher education is we don't just need work-ready graduates for today, we need work-ready plus graduates for tomorrow. So it's no good then to simply say we're going to do exactly what the employers of today want in the lines of work that are available today. We've got to somehow or other look at the plus. This is not new. We've been talking about this for decades. You know, Faray released the UNESCO report in 1972 called Learning to Be. It's all the same thing. John Dewey talked about the idea of something doing more than just training people to regurgitate knowledge and skills back in 1906 when he looked at democracy in education and problem-based learning in the United States. But it's timely, I think, and I think its time may have come because there is consternation about exactly what schools, universities and vocational training colleges are producing. So let me now tell you what the plus is, and I'll be really interested in your feedback on this to see if it makes sense. We say that a good graduate of university should of course be work ready. They want to get a job, but the plus involves 4 dimensions. The first dimension is they should be sustainability literate in the 4 pillars of sustainability in their particular professional discipline, number 1. Number 2, they need to be quite clear about how you actually make change work out there in the workplace and in society. They need to have actually practiced and come to understood how you take good ideas and make them happen. This is not always present in the curriculum and certainly not in assessment. The third is that they should be creative and inventive. They should have actually practiced creation and invention in order to produce the new streams of income, if you like, for the societies, but also to be ethical entrepreneurs, in that not only entrepreneurial around making money, but entrepreneurial having learned how to create solutions to deal with intractable social problems. In other words, that social cultural dimension of sustainability. This does not happen if you don't actually have people practicing it in universities. And fourthly, in a sort of fair return to the medieval university in a sense, we're arguing that the 4th component of the plus for work ready is that every graduate should have reflected on the 4 tacit assumptions driving the 21st century agenda. First, growth is good, always, and of course leads to great equity. Secondly, consumption's happiness. Thirdly, ICT is the answer, always the answer. And fourthly, globalisation's great. So that's actually about ethics. Remember I talked about ethical entrepreneurialism, but it's also very much about sustainability. So we're saying that, and this is what I'm looking at in this senior fellowship, we're looking at the outcomes, validating what we actually want to focus on in assessment. Not good assessment. What are we focusing on in assessment? Why? Because assessment drives learning, and I can tell you, it also drives teaching. So we get the wrong focus of assessment, right? Fitness of purpose, the wrong fitness of purpose. You end up people teaching stuff that doesn't count and assessing stuff that doesn't count. And there's piles have been done on fit for purpose assessment and using assessment for learning and of learning, but all of that is a waste if you're not focusing on what counts for the next 20 to 40 years in Australia and beyond. So that, I think, is what's happening internationally. The shift internationally, I'm giving keynotes on this in the UK, Europe, the United States and Canada in October this year, so they're interested. They've just asked me to come and talk about that stuff I just mentioned to you. These are the peak systems in all of those four areas. What they're really interested there then is not just looking at assessment as we used to look at, but looking at the fitness of purpose of assessment. So that issue I think is important. The other thing that's happening internationally then is they're focusing therefore on not just the outcomes being right, but also then on the right design, the right support, the right teaching in order to achieve that right impact I've just been talking about. And that's where a lot of the myths are coming in to the EFS areas that are everywhere else. Information is not learning. Having a MOOC is not a way in which you would learn the capabilities I've just outlined. You do not learn them like that. Learning is a profoundly social experience, but ICT has a very important role to play within that, particularly if it's interactive, particularly if it's just in time, just for me. And that's precisely, of course, what staff want, not just students. That's what you're working on in your networking, which is how can we give staff out there who are disengaged and want to learn about EFS with a cunning solution, how can we give them just in time, just for me access? And ICT has a powerful role to play in that. But I would commend to you the idea that beware, it's only as good as the human beings that surround it and the human beings that engage people with the ICT. So that notion of the 19th century models have been contested, but whether they're being aligned with the sorts of capabilities, the Work Ready Plus that I've been talking about, is something we need to, I think about in the EFS network. If you're interested in this stuff, then I can make available to Colin and Mel and the team the Education Plus paper if you want to have a squiz at that and have a look at it a bit more. And certainly if you want to give me some caring and nurturing feedback, you know, all feedback most gratefully received. It's better to have mud on my face in private from you guys than to go and put myself out in the public arena unaware that I've made a boo-boo. I'm going to stop there, I think, and give you a breather. I remember I'm doing three things. So I've talked about the outcomes of the La Trobe seminar. I've now talked about what's happening internationally. After our break, what we're then going to do is come back and I'm going to alert you to the research on effective networking, because what I've just talked about is the what, and now I'm going to talk about the how.